In the midst of the chaos and desperation of Dunkirk, when thousands of soldiers scrambled to escape the relentless grip of war, there were those who stayed behind. Forgotten by time, these brave men stood their ground, holding the line with unwavering resolve. But what if their sacrifice never truly ended? Join us as we unravel the haunting mystery of Dunkirk's forgotten ghosts, the soldiers left behind, where history and the supernatural collide, and the echoes of war still linger on the windswept beaches of France. Prepare to step into the mist, where the past refuses to let go. The final orders. Dunkirk, May 29, 1940. The roar of warplanes still thundered overhead. The beach was chaos, British and French soldiers rushing to evacuate, boots sinking into wet sand, the distant thud of artillery drawing ever closer. But amidst the desperate retreat, a small British unit received different orders. Lieutenant Arthur Hale, only 24, stood in the shadow of a sand dune with 29 soldiers at his command. The order was clear: hold the perimeter at all costs. They were the final line of defense to buy time for the others to escape. No questions asked. The men saluted. They understood the cost. They knew no boats would return for them. While the sun dipped beneath the gray horizon, the beach slowly emptied. The last ships, silhouetted against burning skies, vanished toward England, carrying away the hope of survival. Still, Hale's unit remained. They dug into the sand, built makeshift defenses, positioned their rifles. They told jokes, smoked the last of their cigarettes, and stared out at the sea waiting. One soldier, Private Callum Reed, scribbled a letter in his journal. It read, "If you're reading this, we stayed behind. We were told we'd be remembered, but something tells me we won't. The tide's coming in. The sky is too quiet. There's something strange in the air tonight. Something watching." As night fell, the wind shifted. Thick mist rolled in from the sea, curling across the beach like ghostly fingers. The soldiers grew quiet. No gunfire, no planes, just the sound of waves, steady, and distant footsteps echoing where there should be none. In the morning, the beach was empty. No bodies, no weapons, just abandoned helmets, footprints in the sand, and a silence that felt wrong. When German patrols arrived hours later, they found the trenches undisturbed, as if the men had simply vanished. No signs of battle, no resistance, no explanation. The unit was declared missing in action. But over the years, strange stories began to surface. Of figures seen standing on the shoreline at night, of whispers in the fog, and of 29 soldiers who never made it home, but never truly left Dunkirk. The abandoned shore. June 1st, 1940. 3 days had passed since the last Allied ship left the shores of Dunkirk. German forces now controlled the coastline, but something about the beach unsettled them. As a German reconnaissance unit approached the southern sector, one officer, Captain Klaus Reiter, noticed how deathly quiet everything was. He expected signs of a final skirmish. Shell casings, fallen bodies, scorched ground. Instead, he found a ghost town. The trenches were intact, rifles still propped on the sandbags. Blankets and canteens lay where soldiers had slept. A kettle of cold tea sat undisturbed near a fire pit. But not a single body, not even blood. And then there were the footprints. Dozens of them, boot prints in the sand, leading in circles, some heading inland, some toward the sea. But no tracks leaving the area. No signs of struggle. Just the sense that the soldiers had vanished. One of Ryder's men called out. He had found something. A small notebook half buried in the sand. Inside, only one line was readable, scrawled in shaking handwriting. They came from the fog. Suddenly, the sky dimmed. Clouds rolled in unnaturally fast. A chill cut through the air, though it was nearly summer. Several of the soldiers began to shiver. One even dropped his weapon, mumbling about whispers near the dunes. Captain Ryder barked at his men to stay sharp. But deep down, even he could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes. They completed their search by sundown. No signs of combat. No enemy resistance, and still, no explanation for the disappearance of an entire unit. Later that night, Two German soldiers stationed on watch near the shore swore they saw figures standing in the distance. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. They raised their rifles, but when the spotlight scanned the beach, there was nothing there. The next morning, one of the guards was missing. His footprints led down to the surf, then stopped. His partner had no memory of hearing anything during the night, just the wind and the waves. The report was buried by higher command, labeled as battlefield stress, hallucinations, or cowardice. But the locals began to whisper about the gray soldiers who roamed the fog, silent, waiting. Even today, some fishermen in Dunkirk claim that on certain nights, when the tide is low and the fog drifts inland, you can see them, standing at attention, facing the sea, waiting for orders that never came. Strange reports. Years passed. The war ended. Europe began to rebuild. The world tried to move on from the horrors it had witnessed. But in Dunkirk, the silence never truly returned. Local fishermen were the first to speak up. They talked about strange sights during the early dawn, the hour when the mist rolls thickest along the shore. They said they saw men standing in formation, motionless, staring out to sea, always in the same place, always at the same time. When approached, the figures would vanish. No footprints, no trace. An old French woman named Madame Lefebvre, who ran a small seaside cafe, began keeping a notebook of these visits. She marked over a dozen sightings in 1 year alone. She said it always happened around late May, close to the anniversary of the evacuation. One night, she claimed she heard a knock on her back door. When she opened it, no one was there, only wet boot prints leading away into the fog. That night, her radio turned on by itself, playing a crackling military broadcast that hadn't been aired in decades. Tourists began to report similar incidents. A British backpacker visiting the site said he spotted several men near the old bunkers, dressed in outdated uniforms. Thinking they were reenactors, he waved at them, but they didn't respond. He took a photo, only to find the space completely empty in the picture. He left the beach shaken. That night, he posted online. It was like they were real, but not alive. Another visitor, a Dutch war historian, said he heard marching boots echoing across the dunes, though he was entirely alone. He described it as a procession of memory, like ghosts walking paths they couldn't abandon. Some said it was mass hallucination. Others chalked it up to stress, trauma, imagination. But those who spent time in Dunkirk knew something felt unfinished. A local historian, Jacques de Villers, believed the beach itself held residual energy, a kind of loop, he called it, where the spirits of those who never left were trapped in their final moments, forever replaying the orders they were never allowed to disobey. He once said during a radio interview, "They're not here to haunt. They're here because no one came back for them. They stayed because someone had to. Since then, the area has drawn quiet visitors. Not ghost hunters, not thrill seekers, just people leaving behind poppies, dog tags, and handwritten notes in the sand. All addressed to the forgotten men of Dunkirk, the survivor's diary." For decades, the military record showed the same thing. 30 men left behind at Dunkirk, presumed dead. No bodies, no burial, just names on a memorial wall. But in 1978, something surfaced that changed everything. In an old storage unit in Kent, a family discovered a sealed army trunk belonging to their late grandfather, Private Henry Talbot, a low-ranking soldier who had always refused to talk about the war. Inside, along with medals and a faded uniform, was a leather-bound notebook. It was his diary. The final pages were dated May 30th, 1940, just one day before the evacuation ended. The entries began normally: weather updates, unit movements, talk of hunger, and sleepless nights. But near the end, the tone changed. Henry wrote about how he was separated from his unit during the chaos of retreat. Lost and disoriented, he stumbled into a group of British soldiers camped along the dunes. He wrote, "They looked calm, too calm, like they already knew what was coming. The men welcomed him, gave him water, even shared their last ration tin." He remembered one of them, Lieutenant Hale, by name. Young, clear-eyed, polite. Then came the strangest moment. Hale told me, "Go. You weren't meant to stay. We'll cover this ground." I offered to fight with them, but he just shook his head, said this place is ours now. Talbot left that night. As he walked away, he turned back to wave. But the beach was empty. No fire, no men, just mist curling across the sand. He never told anyone what happened. Until now, through his diary. Military records confirm Lieutenant Arthur Hale was the leader of the lost unit, presumed dead along with his men. The revelation sent shockwaves through the war history community. How could Talbot have met them, alive, days after their disappearance, when official accounts placed their deaths earlier? Some dismissed the story as trauma-induced delusion. But one detail was impossible to ignore. Henry described Hale wearing a distinctive red scarf, a personal item confirmed by letters from Hale's family, something never made public. There's more. Talbot's diary ended with a final entry. They're not gone. Not really. They're still there, watching the sea, holding the line. And maybe that's all they ever wanted someone to see them. After the diary's discovery, interest in the Dunkirk ghosts surged. But none of the theories, historical, psychological, or supernatural, could explain what Talbot saw, or why, to his dying day, he kept a red scarf folded beneath his pillow. The French Connection. Normandy, 1965. 25 years had passed since the chaos of Dunkirk. France was rebuilding. The war had become memory for most. But for Jean Moreau, a retired French soldier and amateur historian, the past was never far. That summer, Jean returned to Dunkirk for the first time since 1940. He had fought in the retreat and narrowly escaped on one of the last boats. Guilt clung to him like fog. He had watched men stay behind to cover their retreat, and he had never forgotten them. One morning, just before sunrise, Jean decided to walk the old forest path along the dunes. The trees were thin there, twisted by sea, wind, and time. The path curved toward the cliffs, overlooking the beach. That's when he saw them. 5 soldiers wearing old British uniforms, rifles slung over their shoulders. They looked lost, but calm, like men trying to remember where they were supposed to be. Jean approached, thinking it was a group of reenactors. He raised a hand in greeting, switching instinctively to English. "Lost are we?" he asked. One of the men, a tall, pale figure with sharp features and a dusty helmet, stepped forward. He nodded slowly and replied in perfect, clipped English. "We're looking for the beach. The evacuation point. Have you seen it?" Jean hesitated. The beach was less than a mile away, but something about the man's tone, his voice, his eyes, felt unearthly, like someone repeating lines from long ago. He offered to walk with them, pointing toward the cliffs, but when he turned back to guide them, they were gone. Not a sound, no footsteps, no rustling, just the wind through the trees. Jean ran forward, searching between the trunks, calling out. Nothing. He stood alone in the still woods, breath caught in his throat. He returned to town, shaken. A week later, he sketched the faces he remembered and submitted a letter to a British War Museum, hoping someone might recognize the unit. To his surprise, he received a reply. One of the faces, drawn from memory, matched a photo of Private Calambre, a soldier officially declared missing at Dunkirk. Jean had never seen the photo before. The resemblance was exact. More chilling still, the uniform details Jean described, specific insignia, outdated gear, matched regulations from 1940. Not modern reenactments, not replicas. When asked if he was certain about the encounter, Jean simply said, "I serve with real men. I know the living. These were not the living, but they were not at rest either." Since then, the forest trail above Dunkirk has earned a nickname among locals. Lou sent your to silence here, the path of the silent. They say if you walk there at dawn, you may see men who don't belong. Not ghosts in the traditional sense, but soldiers still looking for a beach that no longer waits. Echoes in the fog. October 1992. A team of British and French archaeologists arrived at Dunkirk to conduct a routine survey of wartime trenches along the coastline. The goal was simple: document and preserve any remaining artifacts before erosion claimed them. The team consisted of 6 professionals, historians, military experts, and 1 radio technician. They had the latest gear, high-frequency scanners, and a base camp set up just beyond the dunes. For the first 2 days, everything went smoothly. They mapped out rusted helmets, bullets, and crumbling bunkers. But on the third morning, the fog arrived. It wasn't natural. It rolled in thick and fast, with a chill that cut through jackets and gloves. The air grew heavy. Even birds stopped singing. The ocean could no longer be heard, as if the sound had been swallowed. Their equipment began to fail. GPS signals flickered. Radios emitted static. One technician, Jack Holloway, said the compass on his wrist spun wildly for 10 full minutes before snapping back to north. Then came the footsteps. At first, they thought it was another team. But the footsteps were too synchronized, marching in unison, heavy boots crunching through wet sand. The group stood still, staring into the mist. And then they saw them. Silhouettes. Dozens of them. British soldiers in full WWII gear, advancing silently through the fog. No shouting, no noise, just the sound of movement, methodical, deliberate. One historian, Dr. Elise Martin, called out, "Hello, are you part of the reenactment group?" No response. She raised her camera and took a photo. Flash, blink, and then they were gone. The silhouettes dissolved into the mist like smoke. But when they reviewed the camera screen, it was blank. No figures, no fog, just an overexposed blur. That night, in their camp, strange sounds filled the darkness. Shuffling boots outside the tents, metal clinking, and once, a low voice, just one word whispered in clipped English. "Hold!" The next morning, they found boot prints surrounding the tents. Dozens of them, military issue, but no one else had been on site. They packed up early. Before leaving, Jack set up one last test, an old shortwave radio tuned to an unused military frequency. After 15 minutes of static, a faint signal broke through. Morse code, repeating over and over. They translated it later. "Stand fast. Hold the line. Hold the line." The signal vanished after 3 minutes. The frequency? It hadn't been used since 1940. No official explanation was ever given. The report was quietly filed away, but those who were there still speak of it in private. They say Dunkirk doesn't forget, and the men left behind are still carrying out their orders. Haunting broadcast, March 2006. A local history radio station in Dunkirk, Radio Mer du Nord, had recently restored an old British military transmitter recovered from a wreck near the coast. It was a collector's project, more for nostalgia than function. But what happened next stunned everyone. One quiet evening, while testing the restored unit on a private channel, the station picked up a strange transmission. It was weak at first, interference, static, warbling tones. But then a rhythm emerged. Morse code, clear, measured, and unmistakably deliberate. The technician on duty, a young Dutchman named Willem van Dahl, wrote it down. B Company, requesting extraction. Holding line, ammo low, coordinates 51.05 degrees north, 2.37 degrees east. The coordinates pointed to the exact stretch of Dunkirk Beach known as Sector, the same sector where Lieutenant Hale and his men were last seen in 1940. Willem assumed it was a prank, but when he played back the recording, he noticed something else. The voice that followed the code. It was faint, almost a whisper beneath the static. A man's voice, tired, calm, and British. "This is Lieutenant Hale. We are still holding. Can anyone hear us?" Willem froze. He replayed it, again and again. The voice never changed. The message never altered. The next day, he brought it to the station manager, who contacted British military historians. An audio expert confirmed something disturbing. The transmission format and radio signature matched British Army communication protocols from World War II. Even stranger, that particular frequency had been decommissioned in 1945. It should have been silent, and yet, for 3 consecutive nights, the signal returned, always at the same time, 3:17 a.m. Each time, the exact same message. "We are still holding. Can anyone hear us?" After the third night, the transmission stopped. Gone, as if it had never existed. Skeptics blamed old equipment, overlapping frequencies, even atmospheric anomalies. But no one could explain why the voice matched archived records of Hale's field voice from a surviving film reel. Same cadence, same tone, same man. Radio Mayor Du Nord never broadcast the recording publicly, but copies of the audio leaked. Some say if you listen closely, with headphones in silence, you can hear more beneath the static. Breathing, footsteps, and, faintly, a sound like waves washing over metal helmets. Today, paranormal radio enthusiasts call it the Dunkirk signal, and many believe it isn't a ghost story at all, but a distress call trapped in time, looping endlessly from the sands of 1940. The tunnel beneath. June 2014, during a coastal renovation project near the old Dunkirk fortifications, construction crews stumbled upon a partially collapsed structure beneath the dunes. At first, it appeared to be an old storage space, but further inspection revealed something more complex. A sealed tunnel, nearly 80 meters long, buried and forgotten since World War II. Military engineers were called in. The entrance was reinforced, oxygen levels checked. Once it was safe, a small team of historians and specialists entered. Inside, they found darkness, and something worse than darkness, silence. The kind that pressed in on the ears like water, swallowing every footstep. The walls were lined with rotting wood beams, rusted wire, and faded British markings. Further in, they discovered what looked like an old command post. There were remnants of life. A rusted kettle, empty cans of rations, a soldier's helmet resting atop a folded jacket, and then something chilling, scratch marks, dozens of them, on the stone wall near the end of the tunnel. Long, frantic, uneven, as if someone had clawed at the rock in desperation, trying to get out or trying to keep something from coming in. One of the historians, Dr. Felix Boone, found a message etched into the concrete using the tip of a bayonet. Faded, but still legible under a flashlight beam. We held. They never came. Still here. Nearby, a rusted field radio sat atop a crate. It wasn't plugged into any power source, but its needle flicked suddenly, once when touched. Just once. The deeper the team went, the stranger the findings. In a corner was a tattered photograph of a British soldier with handwriting on the back. Until the last man. Another section of the tunnel showed signs of more recent disturbance. Footprints in the dust. Fresh, according to one crew member. But no one had entered that far. Worse still, one of the workers, Antoine, claimed he saw a figure standing at the tunnel's end, just beyond the flashlight's reach. He described a man in shadow, unmoving, helmet on, staring directly at him. Antoine dropped his tools and ran. He refused to return to the site. The tunnel was sealed again days later, officially labeled structurally unsound. Unofficially, the team agreed. Something remained inside. Not bones, not bodies, but presence. An energy that refused to die. And above ground. Even now, locals say that near the dunes where the tunnel lies buried, you can hear it. Scratching, like fingernails on stone. Deep below the earth, still trying to be heard. A message in the sand. August 2019. A Dutch tourist named Eric Mulder, visiting Dunkirk with his wife, rose early to walk the beach at sunrise. The tide was low, the sky glowing pale orange, and a light mist hung over the shore, soft and haunting. He brought his camera, hoping to capture the serenity of the morning. The beach was empty, or so he thought. About 100 meters ahead, he noticed something etched into the sand, too precise to be caused by wind or tide. Long lines, uniform in spacing, as if drawn by a careful hand. He moved closer, heart beating faster. In large block letters, scrawled across the smooth surface of the beach, were the words, "We never left." Eric froze. There were no footprints nearby, no signs that anyone had been there. Only the writing, clear and undisturbed. Thinking it might be an art installation, he took several photos. Then, unsure what to do, he waited nearby to see if anyone would come forward to claim it. But no one did. The tide returned slowly as the morning warmed. Within 20 minutes, the sea washed over the message, erasing it completely. That evening, Eric uploaded the photo to a historical travel forum. The image sparked immediate interest. Users zoomed in, enhanced contrast, and discovered something even more disturbing. Beneath the message, just barely visible in the sand, were what appeared to be boot prints, British military issue, circa 1940. Not modern, and the stride length? Too straight, too perfect, as if the men who walked had moved in formation. A local war historian later confirmed that the area where the message appeared overlapped exactly with Sector E, the last position held by the missing unit led by Lieutenant Hale. That same week, another report came in. A family staying at a nearby holiday rental claimed to hear chanting at night. When asked what they meant, they said it sounded like men repeating orders in rhythm, carried by the wind through the open windows. Stand fast. Hold the line. Stand fast. When a family checked the sand outside their cottage the next morning, they found a line of perfectly spaced boot prints leading from the dunes to the sea. No one had walked there. No one had gone swimming. Just prints. Eric never returned to Dunkirk, but his photograph remains one of the most discussed, unexplained war relics in Europe. Some believe it was a prank. Others, a message. One last call from the forgotten soldiers who stayed behind, who never boarded a boat and never surrendered. And when the sea is quiet and the beach is empty, some say you can still hear it. Not voices, not cries, just the words. We never left. The eternal watch. Dunkirk today is a place of peace. Children play along the sand where once shells exploded. Tourists walk the shoreline. Unaware, they're tracing the very ground where thousands once fought to live another day. But not everyone left, and not everyone could. Local residents speak softly about a presence. Not malevolent, not threatening, but constant. They call them the Watchers. Figures that appear in the mist just before dawn. Always facing the sea. Never speaking, never moving. Many believe it is the missing unit. Lieutenant Hale and his men. The 30 who were left behind. Not forgotten by history, but overlooked by time itself. A British veteran once returned to Dunkirk with his grandson. He stood on the beach for hours, silently gazing into the fog. When asked what he was looking for, he said, "For the ones who kept their word, the ones who held the line." He didn't say ghosts. He said guardians. Perhaps that's what they've become. Bound not by tragedy, but by duty. By the final order they received, hold the line. And so they do. Every year, on the anniversary of the evacuation, a small group of locals gathers before sunrise. No fanfare, no speeches, just silence. They place poppies in the sand. Sometimes they bring a cup of tea or a red scarf. Simple tributes for those who were never given funerals. There's a quiet reverence, as if for just a few moments the veil between now and then lifts and the soldiers return, not to haunt, but to be seen, to be remembered. One eyewitness swears he once saw a single soldier salute the waves, then vanish with the morning light. Another claimed a foghorn sounded from the empty sea, just as the tide pulled back, leaving behind a single helmet in the sand. There are no official plaques for the missing 30, no museum wing, no grave, but the beach itself has become their memorial, their watch post. And perhaps that's how it should be, because they didn't stay behind in fear. They stay by choice, to give others a chance to live. And now, in the silence between the tides, in the stillness of early morning mist, you might feel it too. A presence, a promise, a line that was never broken. They're still there, watching, waiting, holding the line. The soldiers of Dunkirk may have been left behind, but their story, like the ghostly figures in the fog, remains waiting to be heard. Their courage, their sacrifice, and their undying commitment to their comrades will never fade into history. As we close the chapter on this haunting tale, remember, some ghosts never leave, and some lines are never truly crossed. If you want more stories where the past comes alive, be sure to subscribe and join us next time on Wartime Shadows, where history and mystery meet once again.